All right. So are there any questions? Cool. So we'll talk about kind of a few different things today. That's the first thing I wanted to show you. So we've been dealing a lot with cloud formation, and you're still working on your assignment for basically configuring a number of systems using cloud formation. Today I wanted to talk about one of the things I want to talk about is another way of kind of dealing with this issue of doing configurations so that you can basically spin up other machines off of that. Let me go ahead and I'll just create here, and yeah, we'll do that. And I can edit the security group to go to, let's see. And let me go to okay, so that's gonna that's loading, and I should be able to. All right, so let's make sure that we can log into that. And so I'm logged in, etc. And see, yes, we have the date set properly and all of that. So we saw previously, once we log in, we have full administrative rights and all of that. We could do whatever configurations we need to do, install whatever additional software. We can, if we're dealing with something like a web server, we could basically then grab the particular application, the web application itself, place that in the right locations, all of those kinds of things. Once you kind of have the server basically where you want it. What you can do is the following. So let's go over to here. Let's see. May not actually be able to. Let's see. Image. Right. So notice under image, I can create an image. Right. So basically, we can take a configured image itself, that is an instance itself that is running, that is set up exactly the way you want it, and you can create your own image off of that. Okay. Now, in terms of using the image and all the right. So, for instance, just go create the image. Right. Basically, give it a name. Okay. Right, and so we have various options, etc. So let me go ahead and notice it is not encrypted, and all that. I'll create the image. It says yes, we have the request to create the image, snapshots, etc. And so here it's creating basically a snapshot. So the snapshots essentially are an image, or basically the as the name suggests, a snapshot in time of the particular image. So whatever the state of the machine is at the particular time that we create the snapshot basically stores all of that information for us. So if we wanted to do things like backup databases, backup our server, etc., you can certainly do that. In terms of backing up databases, generally they recommend you actually stop the instance and then create the snapshot and then restart the instance if you really want to avoid kind of any weird kinds of concurrency types of issues and all of that. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So the snapshot is created and all. Let's see. Do I have? Right. Notice when I go to my Amy's now, I have the option for selecting from this particular image itself. Okay. So I can create an image off of this. I'll leave all of those options, etc. I am still going to need to modify my security group to the appropriate place, right? And remember, I mean, the security group isn't necessarily part of the image per se. That's essentially our firewall rules into the image. Right, so there it is. Let me go ahead. Yes, we'll use the Dropbox key. You know, technically I have uploaded the key, so let's actually give this a shot.
So does Amazon apply charges for creating the snapshot?
The charges basically are the charges that you pay for volume storage. So other than that, though, generally, no, there really isn't that kind of charge.
And while creating an image, if you have a database, so will that image also store the database's content or just the structure of the database?
No, it's literally a copy of the disk. So it stores everything on the that's on the disk at that time. All right, let me take a look. Let's see. So over here, really shouldn't have. Why would that have closed? All right, so I should be able to. I think this is the one. We'll double check. Yes, this is the new one. Right. Notice when I created this, I actually did not specify a key pair when I created off of that particular image. Okay, and there's a couple of reasons that I bring this up. So the image that I've actually created is an image just for me. So in case of a particular company, right, I could basically have my images pre-created. I have the appropriate SSH keys installed on them. Then whoever needs, we could create the various user accounts, all of those kinds of things. Whoever needs then to log in will be able to do that, and they'll be able to log into whichever instance of the servers we have. And later on, when we talk about load balancing and things like that, we'll see you can basically sort of specify, okay, you build off of this particular image and so forth. You're able to also create your own publicly available community images, right? So just as we have access ourselves to, for instance, the main images, and remember, so if I go back over. Okay, so we have sort of our quick start version of images, but remember, in terms of the community images, there are thousands of these things, right? And all manners of different images and so forth, right? So notice there are different operating system choices that you have, architectures, etc., right? Then, of course, we can go to the marketplace where there's even further images that you can get access to and so forth. And so, you know, if you explore these, a lot of times, you know, so some examples of these, you'll see a lot of examples where They're images created for various popular content management systems. So, for instance, you can find images that already have Drupal and the web server basically set up and the database and so forth, so that you can essentially just spin those up and away you go. Things like WordPress, again, there are existing images for that. There is for those of you who are in my my hacking class, right? There's actually a Kali Linux image that's available there too, so you can run Kali Linux directly within Amazon's cloud, okay, and do that. One note about that, and a note in general, okay. So Amazon is very careful to explain the cloud. AWS is Amazon's cloud services, and what I mean by that is literally it's the exact same hardware. It is the infrastructure that Amazon uses to run Amazon.com. Okay, so if you start misbehaving in AWS, they will block you. They will basically shut off your access and so forth. One of the things, for instance, that you are not allowed to do by default is to initiate a penetration test on your system. Okay, so if you have your system installed in AWS and you start basically hammering away at it, right? Again, because it's sort of the infrastructure for Amazon itself and everybody else, there could potentially be an issue with resource usage. Okay, now you are allowed to do it as long as basically you ask permission first. So essentially, you send them a letter saying, hey, I want to be able to do it. I'm going to be doing a penetration test on my stuff here, right? Here's kind of the time and all of that, and then they'll kind of say, okay, yeah, that's fine, and they'll probably generally watch too, because again, if you're getting carried away, they'll shut you down. Okay. So there's lots of stuff sort of already existing that you have access to. A lot of this stuff in the quote unquote marketplace actually is free. So Amazon does provide the ability for companies to sort of sell their images and those kinds of things, but a lot of these images are actually available for free. Back to the whole reason for why I was talking about this stuff. So, as I said, you're able to create your own images and make those available to the rest of the world. So let's say you did this rather involved configuration for a server, and you want to just be out of the goodness of your heart, essentially share this with the rest of the world. But you have to be careful because of what just happened. Right? Notice, when I spun up this instance, I did not select a key pair, but my key pair is sitting in that image. Okay? So you need to make sure to do things like remove existing key pairs that may be installed before you actually share that with the rest of the world. Otherwise, throw out your existing key pairs. Okay, because you basically just shared part of that stuff with the rest of the world. So those kinds of things you do need to be aware of and all of that. Okay, questions about that stuff. Okay. So snapshots and all those again, they're a mechanism that can be used for. You can use them for backups, and you can. There's actually tools that will allow you to automate calls to doing snapshots for your running instances. And again, like I said, in the case of things like databases, generally you want to kind of shut down the server, do the snapshot, bring the server back up. Because that way you don't have any issues like while you're doing the snapshot process, the database is actually being modified. Okay, that would be problematic. Okay, questions on that much. So let's talk a little bit about this storage section down here, right? So Amazon has a whole bunch of different storage solutions, right? And so the first one is S3. Okay. So S3 the simple cloud storage service, right? Notice object storage built to store and retrieve any amount of data from anywhere. Okay, that's general. In some senses, you can think of it as Amazon's answer to Dropbox, or probably better is what you would build a service like Dropbox on top of. Okay, so you have the ability to store whatever files here and all of that, and we'll kind of look at this in a minute. You can use this for a whole number of different purposes. So one thing that you can do is you can have your server logs automatically backed up to S3. Okay, so that is, as you're rotating out your server logs, you essentially copy those all over to S3. They're not on the instance itself. That way, for instance, if somebody happens to hack your server and decides to delete the logs, you still have access to your logs and so forth. Other things that you can do with this, right? So you can build, for instance, mobile applications where you're storing data in the cloud. You can make use of basically Amazon's S3 service to then store that mobile data for your particular app. You can use it for various backups and services and so forth. You can actually even host your own static website directly from within S3. Okay, so remember, in terms of web content, we essentially talk about this distinction between static web content and dynamic web content, right? So anything in things like PHP, things like EJB, Enterprise Java, ASP.NET, all of that is dynamic content. But if you have just static content, plain old HTML, CSS, maybe some JavaScript, you can actually store that directly in S3 and actually host right out of S3. Okay, so take kind of a look at this. One other quick note before I kind of move on. Right, so here we are. No. Just like the instances themselves, so remember, I mean, the images that we created, just like we saw when we were dealing with CloudFormation, images are tied to a particular region, right? So same thing with the images that you create. Those are actually tied to a particular region, right? Now again, if you're scaling out to other regions and you want basically the same configuration in one of those regions, essentially what you need to do is you need to copy that image out to one of those other regions, and they have documentation for basically doing that. But it is possible then to have that copied out, etc. Okay. One other common use of S3 is for storing large amounts of data, especially the kind of data that you may want to do machine learning, big data analytics types of stuff on. Okay, so you can store huge amounts of data. Web logs are actually a really good example because, especially if you have a very popular website, your logs are going to get your log files are going to get very, very large very, very quickly. And so if you want to be able to sort of analyze that traffic and all of that, the first problem is basically how do you actually store that in a meaningful way? One of the things is too that Amazon actually AWS Public Data. They actually host a number of large public data sets. Okay, so you'll notice, right? So geospatial stuff, right? And let's just say, so for instance, if we go to Landsat. All right, come on, give me some information on the size of this. Does it actually say? Update frequency. It doesn't actually say. Some of them will actually tell you. And I mean, we're talking in some of these cases about terabytes worth of data. So copying them out on your own is certainly not something that's largely going to be fairly feasible, right? Genomics and LightSail. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's available through here. All right. So let's actually look at playing around with the buckets with S3. So again, some vocabulary to actually learn, right? So S3 deals with this concept of buckets. Basically, that's the main folder for storing some particular entity. You can see here I have these weirdly named CF template things that are inside here. And actually, if I click on that, there's a bunch of YAML files, right? Every time we were spinning up instances with CloudFormation and uploading templates, that's where those were going. Okay, basically, by default, it creates an S3 bucket for us and dumps the contents of those files in there. Recall also that when we create a when we create a stack from CloudFormation, we have this option here: specify an Amazon S3 template URL. Okay, so once we understand how to create our own buckets and to add content to there, we can actually upload our YAML files or our CloudFormation templates directly to our S3 bucket, and then you can just specify the URL right here to make use of those particular templates. What's also very nice about that is one of the things that we didn't talk about was the notion of nested templates. Okay, so you can have templates that basically where portions actually refer to other templates. The way you refer to those other templates is by the URL to S3. Okay. So again, we can kind of store all of this stuff in there. Let's go ahead and we'll create a bucket. We'll kind of talk about some of these things. A couple of points. So let's see, where am I now? In terms of creating the bucket, so they talk about this DNS compliant bucket name, etc. Generally, here's the stuff that you need to be aware of are as follows. First of all, the bucket name itself must be globally unique. In other words, you can't name your bucket something that somebody else has already picked. Okay, so I'd be surprised if bucket was actually if it would allow me to if bucket's not taken. In terms of the regions, right? So as I said, they talk about this DNS compliant bucket name. It turns out actually the East region for right now for various for some strange reason, I have a feeling it has to do with backward compatibility. Has this feature turned off? That is, they don't require you to use DNS compliant bucket names in the East region. Actually, it's the North Virginia one is the one where it isn't required. In the other ones, it is actually turned on, and you are required to do that. Okay. In terms of the DNS compliant names, basically, you can use all lowercase characters, no uppercase. You can use dashes and periods. You can also use numbers, but you can't actually begin the name with a number. Okay, so I'll just do. Cloud class demo. Okay. In terms of dots, for some weird reasons, dealing with, especially when you're dealing with hosting web content in here, generally you want to leave periods out of that. Okay. So there, basically, I can create my bucket. When you first create it, you'll notice you have a few different options that you can select from. Versioning. So the content in buckets can be versioned. That is that basically if you upload, if you overwrite existing files, S3 will sort of keep track of all of the different versions for you and allow you to go back to those various previous versions. But you do need to turn that on, right? So if I come over here, I can just say, oh, okay, let's go ahead and enable versioning. Logging, again, you can set up log access, but I'm not going to do that. Tagging, we don't really need that. Permissions, okay? So there's actually a few different ways of setting up permissions for your buckets. Okay, so we have our general permission set here, and so you notice, of course, basically says, all right, here's the particular users, right? So here's my user account. I can read, right? I can basically do whatever I want to the bucket. Notice I could actually add other people's accounts, and then we have things like public permissions as well, right? So whether we want to grant read access and so forth. So I'm going to leave that turned off for right now. Right, and then just go ahead and create my bucket. Okay. So now, having done that, I can click on the bucket, and here it is. Right, nothing special. And then we can certainly upload files to it. So if I click on upload here, I could go to let's grab, for instance, one of our cloud formation templates. Actually, grab this one. Click upload, right? And there it is. Our file is in fact up there. Notice we can get information about it. Here's sort of the web link for that file, which you'll notice if I click on this right now, it comes up and says, hey, you don't have access because basically it is not publicly readable. Okay, but I do still have access to this. I can now actually, but I could use this, for instance. So if I say copy that link, right, and then coming over to here, double check which region that's in. Yes, I created that in Ohio. I'm in Ohio here, so that means I should be able to paste that in there. Right, and you'll notice it basically reads our stack and so forth, and will allow us to go on creating right from that particular entry. Okay. All right. So yes.
Usually, in development, whenever we upload to the S3 bucket, we use the CloudFront URL to access the S3 bucket image or whatever file you have. So what's the difference between this URL and why do people usually use CloudFront?
The CloudFront. Well, Amazon's CloudFront is slightly different. It actually will work in tandem with S3. CloudFront is a content distribution network. And so the idea behind that is, and essentially essentially what happens is you create your bucket, you can then configure CloudFront to essentially manage that particular material. The basic idea behind content distribution networks, and like I said, Akamai's was one of them. Right. So right there. The basic idea behind content distribution networks is to get the content as close to the user as possible. Okay, so the whole idea is that what happens is, in Amazon's case or in Akamai's case, they essentially have servers out at sort of the edge of the network, basically the main places where most people are in fact actually connecting when they're getting their internet traffic. And so the idea is that we've basically duplicated that material across all of those spaces so that way when they go to load up the page, they're actually getting the content faster. Because they're actually physically closer, and just physics, the speed of light is constant. And also because by doing that, by basically spreading that out, it means that I don't have all of my users hammering on my one web server. Okay, so that's essentially the distinction there between CloudFront versus S3. And like I said, they generally work in tandem because you sort of activate that on top of that.
The CloudFront is to cache the data.
Exactly. I mean, that's the whole point of any of those is that you do provide. So again, I mean, most of the time you're really talking about static kinds of assets as opposed to dynamically generated assets because yeah, it is in fact essentially going to be cached. Okay. So we have we can have our bucket and so forth. Now. In terms of having our own website within there, so let me do this, right? So, call it my website. I'll just leave it on that. Oh, yep, yeah, not surprising. There, see if that's taken. It is not. Okay, versioning, yeah, maybe I'll turn that on for, well, no, I didn't want to learn more. There we go. Okay, so I'll turn that on for that. That's fine. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and make this publicly readable. And we'll go ahead and create the bucket. Okay, so here's my bucket itself. Now, there is actually one other thing that I do need to do. So I want to come over to properties, and you'll notice there is the option here after we've created it for static website hosting. Okay. So when I click on that, notice it basically gives me these various options. So I'm going to say, yeah, use this bucket to host a website, right? And then I have various options. So what's the index document? Well, that's just going to be index.html. The error document, right? So yeah, I'll put that in as well. The error document basically is for instance, when think of things like a 404 error, basically that page that is ultimately displayed. The rest of the stuff I don't really have to worry about. Okay, and now we essentially have the ability to host our content there, right? Once I click on that, you'll notice I do have this little endpoint stuff listed here. So this is basically the URL that I can use for accessing my content. I don't actually have anything in there just yet, so I'm going to get that nasty error, right? So we can build up a quick web page. All right, there's that. And so no, I don't want anything else. That's fine. All right, so that is uploaded, and let me go ahead and try to reload this. Notice we are still getting an error. Why? Because I also need to, I need to make the file itself public. And so there's my content. Now, as I said, so this we do have versioning turned on and so forth. So I can do things like say, okay, so now I'm just going to add in right here. All right, once again, I'll go to upload. Okay. So that is uploaded. Let's just double check that. Do I have to do that? I shouldn't have to. Pardon?
You have to make it public.
I have to make it public every time? That's annoying. Let's see. Okay. Bless you. Then we should be able to go. Where is it now? I did turn on versioning, didn't I? There is versioning. Sorry? Thank you. Right. So here's the different versions of that, right? So notice we can actually come to here to look at that. I can do open. Oh, yeah, fine. There's the old version of the site. All right. Now, S3 buckets are resources just like security groups and EC2 instances. In other words, just as we can create our EC2 instances from within CloudFormation, you can actually create and configure S3 buckets from within CloudFormation as well. Okay, so you could have your bucket created by that. You can actually have it named automatically, or you could do something like get the name via a parameter. What actually is sort of a downside for that is in terms of the content itself. So you recall before we were essentially dynamically creating our index.html inside our CloudFormation script. We can't actually do that for the S3 buckets. Okay, so we don't have the option for spitting that file out directly. Supposedly there is some weird way of uploading local content, and I haven't gotten a chance to really kind of try that out. But it doesn't seem to be something that's used quite a bit for that. Okay, but nevertheless, we can actually create buckets and so forth. In terms of S3 pricing, I mean, just so you can kind of get an idea. Let's see. This is not what I wanted. Right. So first of all, I mean, the pricing is based on the region. It was funny actually. Over the weekend, I was reading a book on this, and they were saying, oh, you should use the Oregon region because its rates are way cheaper right now. Just so you can kind of see, right? So here's the rates for the U.S. East, North Virginia, right? So notice. 2.3 cents per gigabyte worth of data stored, so reasonably cheap. If I go to Oregon, yeah, it's actually the same thing. There are some where I think like Northern California, yeah, we get up to 2.6, but again, I mean, still not really too bad. Might be even right, Mumbai, still not too bad. Singapore, right, etc. Okay. Now, they also talk about Glacier. Okay. So, the idea behind Glacier, right, is if you want to store stuff that you know you're not necessarily going to be accessing frequently. So S3, for instance, if I'm hosting a website, right, presumably it's going to be a popular website and it's going to be accessed a whole bunch, it's going to be accessed very frequently. On the other hand, let's say I'm doing data backups for my site, right? In that case, I mean, realistically, probably the only time I'm really going to have access to that data is when something horrible has happened. Okay, so I can trade off. Basically, it's a trade-off. Okay, they will charge you less in terms of storing your data, but the access time is considerably greater, on the order of 1 to 2 days to be able to before you can actually access your data. You can almost think of it as kind of the equivalent of a sort of tape backup, if you will. Okay, so and let's see, just to have the pricing guide here. Not here. Right. 0.4 cents per gigabyte. Okay. So again, not bad. All right. And so buckets, we can do things. So for instance, here's you could delete them and all of that. Let's talk about another service. So, how many people have their own website and have gotten their own hosting and all of that? Oh, okay. Some of the really popular hosting services. There's a few of them. One of them is DigitalOcean. There's a couple of other ones, and they're fairly cheap. They're around $5 a month typically for their starting plans, and they basically actually make it really, really easy for people to get a server up and running and all of that. And for the longest time, basically, Amazon didn't really have anything in that particular space. I mean, we had EC2, we have things for instance, static web of being able to use S3, but nothing really to kind of service that particular market. That's where LightSail comes in. So, LightSail is EC2 for dummies. Or rather, EC2, it's cheap EC2 without a lot of hassle. Okay, so you'll notice, I mean, when it comes in, it sort of looks totally different than the regular Amazon console and all of that, right? So if we create an instance, okay, so we can say, okay, where do we want this? And then basically you can pick what type of stack you want to host on there, right? So certainly you could do things like a straight up LAMP stack or mean stack. Notice Nginx is there. There's a Node.js, but you can also you also have various popular apps as well. So WordPress, the popular blog hosting type of stuff. Joomla and Drupal are content management systems. Magento is actually a very popular e-commerce type of site. So I'll just sort of fire up WordPress so we can kind of see this. So let's see. Right, so we kind of come through here. Yeah, they do have links for talking about this. Let's see. Default key pair. Yeah, so I'll change my key pair. Can I? Oh yes, I can't. Can't change it directly to. So fine, we'll use this default key pair. Hopefully. Let me do this. There. All right. So I have the key pair, right, and then notice there's the basic plan prices and all of that. So unlike EC2, where essentially the pricing for EC2. Notice, so the pricing here is basically based per hour in terms of your usage. There, essentially, you're going to get sort of a flat rate for all of that. So here it is, right? So $5 a month and all of that. I'll just leave the name just as it is, and let's go ahead and click create. Well, that's thinking, right? So notice basically here they have information on the image that we've actually that we've launched this from. Bitnami, which is the group that basically provides this. They actually create a lot of different images available, images for people to use on these on a lot of these content management systems and all of those. You'll notice again, I mean, so pricing information again, so they're not actually charging for the particular pricing and so forth. You can actually use this. You could actually use this image directly from within EC2. So if you didn't want to use it from within LightSail, you could actually use this image itself direct from there. Let's see. Says it's up and running. Right. There's our options. Right here's the IP address. So let me go ahead and go to that. That's very reassuring. It did just start, so maybe that's what it is. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Okay, so the usage once the instance. Okay, enter that into the browser. You'll see the WordPress. Okay, the default. All right, well, we did that. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So here's the default, right? And then they basically walk you through. Where is it? Back over here. Oh, yeah. The default server user is user. Then where do we get our password from? There's the directory structure. Well, it should be there someplace. All right. Oh, and we are in now. Okay. So they give you a little browser-based SSH as well that we have access to, so you can see. Oh yeah, there it is. Right. So there's the password it created for me. I should be able to go into this now. Let's see. No. Okay, maybe not then. right? And so again, we can run all of our friendly Linux commands and so forth as needed.
So, but you did not select any operating system while creating the WordPress.
I did right. It does. It doesn't actually. I mean, all it gives you in terms of creating it are those image options, which I think all of them are Linux based, right? But it doesn't actually give you. It doesn't even give you the particular flavor. So you can see this one, in fact, is actually based on a fairly old version of Ubuntu 14. Okay. And so let's see, how do I get rid of this? There it is. The username is supposedly given, let's see. Right, the username is supposed to, I thought, be user. Let's see. Yes, the default server administrator is user. Check the document, which I did, but that didn't seem. Oh, maybe this one has more info. Supposed to be user. Oh, unless, well, is it Bitnami? Because they also said Bitnami there. Let's try that. Yeah, I'm definitely locked out. Yes, that's what I tried. And the password was... Just make sure that's... Oh, that's why I didn't actually copy it. Okay, let me try that again. There we are. Right. So then we're into the admin section of WordPress. I don't actually ever use WordPress, so. Okay. So once you're done with that, of course, then let's see. So yeah, we'll go ahead and delete the instance. Right, and basically back to this. Questions about that stuff? Okay, so I'm going to stop here today, and we'll talk some more about other things next time.
So, but Amazon website is dynamic, right? Amazon
WordPress, you mean?
No, the Amazon website on which they sell stuff. That is a dynamic website.
Which one is? S3?
No, on which they sell their products and all. Amazon.com.
Oh, Amazon.com. Absolutely is dynamic. Amazon.com itself is basically built on top of all of these tools. The tools that you see here, for the most part, came out of basically solving the problems that the Amazon engineers themselves had to solve, right? So I mean, obviously, the servers that run it basically are essentially EC2 instances. There's heavy use of CloudFormation templates and various other things that are in here as well. So yeah, I mean, they really are the example of eating their own dog food, right? And that's usually, that type of company is usually where you tend to get some really solid products, because they are constantly experiencing their own pain points and so forth. All right.